Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are putting on our investigative auditor hats because we're opening a highly classified, honestly mind-bending dossier. We are conducting a formal metaphysical audit of Project Neo-Arcadia. Right now, there is a deeply philosophical ontological war that is literally threatening to tear apart the dark Gothic fabric of this city. We are tracking a post-heroic prophet known as the Jester, and he is actively shattering the city's mechanics. It's our job to map out exactly how and why this is happening. We're going to look at the forces fighting for the city's soul and investigate the sheer, destructive power of creative play.
Okay, let's look at the dossier index for today's audit. First, the parameters of Project Neo-Arcadia. Second, the Mausoleum of Stasis. Third, the Rituals of Deconstruction. Fourth, the Tribunal of Ash. Fifth, Synthesis within the Void. And finally, our verdict on the Sovereign of Play.
Section 1. Audit. Project Neo-Arcadia. The parameters of the ontological war.
Right, before we dive into the actual events, we really need to nail down the baseline criteria for this audit. According to our sources, this war is basically a primal conflict mapped perfectly to Johann Gottlieb Fichte's dialectic. On one side, you have the absolute itch, the self-positing I. Think of this as infinite creative activity. The files say this identity is born from the hero's barrow as a womb of becoming, so it's completely independent of all history. On the exact opposite side is the absolute not I, the terminal resistance. This entropic force acts as a necessary floor, constantly pushing back against that creative activity. Understanding this immense friction is absolutely crucial to decoding the stakes here.
Let's move to Section 2, the Mausoleum of Stasis, the architecture of silence. So let's look at our subjects. Gibba Shotten, the Puppet King, perfectly embodies that absolute not I. He rules from a rusted iron throne, and his mechanical spine literally grinds with the crushing inevitability of the state. He preaches what he calls the sovereignty of the mirror, arguing that the individual I is just a malignant fever and true freedom is found only in shutting down the will. But against him stands our absolute ick, the Jester. The Jester represents chaotic creative play and frenzy becoming. The contrast is wild. The king actually dismisses this vibrant dance from his rusted throne, coldly calling the Jester's frenzy a long, bloody joke.
Now, our audit reveals the king doesn't just enforce this mechanical stasis on his own. He uses agents, the tarantula preachers. These corrupted nerds act as literal ministers of shame. They weave these measurable webs of stagnant peace right across the city marketplace. How? By using weaponized equality and the spirit of revenge to force total conformity. They frame any individual assent, any personal drive toward excelsior, as a crime against the collective calm. It's an ideological poison that traps the inhabitants in a web of hidden resentment, making sure nobody dares to rise above the common dirt.
And this all feeds into the state's ultimate objective, the final sunset protocol. You see, the king maintains this cold, detached distance, viewing the Jester and really all citizens as just mere reactors lashed to a shared ancestral void. The end goal is to arrest all motion permanently. The merchants are methodically paralyzed, their ambition gets smothered under layers of guilt until they just surrender completely to a comfortable, silent non-existence. The king offers this piece of the cemetery as a really seductive alternative to the Jester's agonizing climb. It's meant to be the ultimate cure for the restless fever of the eye.
Section 3. Rituals of Deconstruction. The Anomaly of Frenzy. Now, any good audit has to account for anomalies, right? So let's map out the Jester's kinetic, measurable deconstruction of the established reality. For technical precision, he performs a highly specific six-strike rhythmic assault on the city's clock tower. Step 1 utilizes a chipped axe. Strikes 1, 2, and 3 specifically target the poisoned ancestral roots of the Volsing bloodline. Then Step 2 switches to the distorted scepter. Strikes 4, 5, and 6 unleash the zero flame, triggering a massive magnetic distortion pulse. And the whole time, the Jester is literally laughing, shouting that he's returning linear time back to the primordial void of Jinnengagab. He is actively, forcefully shattering the false peace.
So what does this actually achieve? Well, the ritual completely dissolves the clockwork reality. The zero flame doesn't just, destroy physical market stalls. It melts the social masks of the marketplace right alongside the gold coins, turning it all into a shifting river of becoming. The legalistic order, that spirit of gravity that kept the herd trapped, it's completely unmade. It is a total ontological deconstruction.
Moving on to Section 4, the Tribunal of Ash, the critical danger of zero.
However, we discovered some massive systemic risks during this deconstruction phase. As the Jester uses these runes of destruction to dissolve legal authority, he accidentally births a truly chilling entity, the Red Judge. Just look at the cold binary logic of this skeletal construct. The Red Judge rules a tribunal of ash with, and I quote, a sovereignty based on zero. All existence is merely fuel for a purposeless inferno. Unlike normal societal structures, this judge has replaced the gavel with a branding iron.
This entity perfectly illustrates the supreme danger of active nihilism. When the Jester stares into this skeletal construct, he's actually seeing the terrifying shadow of his own deconstructive impulses reflected right back at him. Because if you deconstruct authority without replacing it with a life-affirming will, you don't get freedom. You just get mechanical condemnation. Stripping away meaning without a new foundation leads only to an empty, consuming fire. The Jester realizes here that simply destroying the king's stasis isn't enough. He has to forge something new.
Section 5. Synthesis within the void. The maw of the absolute. So, to avoid being completely consumed by the Red Judge's nihilism, the Jester enters a limestone vacuum known as the maw of the absolute. He goes in for a period of total sensory deprivation, the ego's eclipse. Now, the Puppet King is watching confidently from his high seat, totally assuming the Jester's laughter is just going to be swallowed up by the dark. But instead, the Jester proves a really vital Fichtean principle. His self-positing will requires absolutely no audience to burn or to justify its existence. Inside the cave, he performs an internal synthesis, successfully merging his tarnished gold and chaotic verdant halves. This transforms him from a mere reactor into a resurrected archetype, one that's capable of manipulating the very act of being itself.
And that brings us to Section 6, the verdict, sovereign of play. The freedom in a doomed universe.
As the confrontation finally hits the splintered floorboards of the marketplace, we can trace the Jester's ultimate transformation through 3 distinct metamorphoses. Phase 1 is the camel, bearing the heavy burden of history. Phase 2 is the lion, roaring a massive no to the Puppet King's stasis. But the most vital is Phase 3, the child of affirmation. By embracing his own Nietzschean shadow, the Jester becomes the laughing Übermensch. He manages to transform the rhythmic, grinding noise of the world's collapse into a brand new, harmonious music of being.
The climax of our audit happens right here. The Jester raises his chipped axe and cleaves the very floorboards of the marketplace to descend into the underworld of the blood. He declares that the Puppet King is really just a symptom of the poisoned ancestral water flowing beneath him all. In response, the king integrates his rusted iron throne directly into his mechanical spine, becoming a literal idol of state inevitability. But the Jester ignores this hollow threat to secure his ontological survival. By facing this deep historical rot directly, the Jester justifies existence as a magnificent, doomed dance upon a grave. Which officially brings our metaphysical audit to a close, but it turns the lens entirely back onto you. Think about it. In our own reality, where systems of stasis constantly push us toward our own versions of a final sunset, how do you respond? Are you going to be a mere reactor, just accepting the curated scripts of illusion handed down by the state? Or do you have the courage to embrace the chaotic creativity of the absolute itch and find true sovereignty, the freedom to play, even in a doomed universe? Sit with that for a while. Keep questioning the framework, and we'll see you in the next explainer.